encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. This is the podcast where we discuss all things related to preaching and ministry. My name is Robert Hatfield. I want to welcome you into this special episode. We've got a big topic today. Cannot wait to discuss a little bit about the impact of AI on the church. And specifically, I assume how that impacts us as ministers as well. We have lots to discuss, and here to help us today, we have lots of guests. Joining us from Madison, Alabama, where he serves the Madison Church of Christ, is Jason Helton. Hey, Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for inviting me on here. I'm excited to learn.
Yeah, same here. I've got my notepad out. Tell us about the seminars that you do.
Okay, the Digital Babylon workshop is something I've done now for about a year and a half. In fact, I just got back from doing a couple down in South Alabama. And a couple of years ago, I was in grad school and was working on a project and was looking for resources that talked about faith and technology and how they overlap and how technology shapes our faith. And I didn't see a whole lot. So I put together a class at Madison, and other folks have found it beneficial. So I've condensed it from 12 weeks into anywhere from 3 to 5 sessions, and I go around to other congregations and try to help start some conversations. I think a lot of people are curious, but not a lot of people know kind of where to begin those conversations. So that's one of my goals there, is to do that, the analog faith and digital Babylon.
That is really cool. And Jason, you serve as the media outreach minister there at Madison. That's the official title, right?
That's the official title. There's one of my elders likes to refer to me as the mom. I was in youth ministry here for 10 years, and then he gave me the title mom. So it's been fun. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And can I one more question just for you? What is it that a media outreach minister does? I mean, tell us about that. Besides being the mom of the staff.
Overworked, underpaid, the usual mom bit. So,
okay.
No, it's a great role. You get to be creative. A lot of the things I do, I developed the skill set in youth ministry and hours on YouTube, learning how to do graphic design and content creation. So the way I kind of tell folks, just to make it concise, is that I create content that communicates the gospel outside the walls, and I do my best to help us communicate better inside the walls, so to speak. So communication and content creation.
I love that. All right. Also here today, joining us from the Denver, Colorado area, Bear Valley Bible Institute, there is Michael Hite. Welcome back, sir. You're here, and we're not talking about logos today.
I know. That's amazing. That's usually what I'm talking about. But it's good to be back.
Yes, great to have you. And I need to say that this episode idea was actually your idea. Last time we recorded about logos, you said, have you done anything about this? Because if you haven't, you need to. Yeah. And I'm thankful you're here. Yeah.
No, I'm glad we can have the conversation. I think it's certainly something that a lot of people have a lot of questions about, and it's pressing. So
yes.
I'm glad to be part of it.
Absolutely. And joining us today, where in the world is Dale Jenkins? He's coming to us from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where CYC is imminent. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Just honored to be with this steer group, such a good group of guys. Proud to know them.
We need to say that this is like a mini reunion of the Ministry Geek podcast here with Michael Hite and Dale Jenkins. We're throwing it way back, but I love this so much. You guys were podcasting before there were podcasts.
Yeah, we really were. How long ago was that, Dale? I mean, not to reminisce, but
yes,
it's got to be 15 years.
Yes, 15 years. Yeah. And we did the powwow one time too. And I was thinking about that the other day. Spring Meadows. So it's been at least 15 years ago.
Yeah, we did Ministry Geek this week for almost 4 years, but that's got to be at least 15 years ago.
Yeah,
and I miss it to this day. We had more fun doing that. It was great fun.
Yeah,
and so the special announcement is Ministry Geek is coming back, and you're announcing it here on this show. Isn't that right? No, that's not.
No.
Okay.
Reunion tour.
It was worth a shot. Okay, I tried, everybody. It was worth a shot. Dale, you're teaching a course right now. Is it through the Nashville School of Preaching?
Yes, I'm teaching a course right now through the Nashville School of Preaching called It's called Technology for Users, Ministry Technology for Users. And it's just simply, as Michael would be very clear in explaining, it's not technical, because anything technical I don't get, but it's tools that ministers can use. And it's approached from the standpoint of, you don't have to be a geek to use this. Anybody can use it. Let's figure out how to use it and make it useful for us in ministry.
And as we're recording this today, you have done, 3 sessions on artificial intelligence. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a lot to discuss, and we're talking again about the impact of AI on the church. I have no idea how to direct all of our questions. Jason, I guess let's just start with you, because you're immediately to the right of me on the screen. If you're watching the video, what is AI? And, maybe somebody's listening to this and they're like, okay, I hear a lot about this AI thing. I don't know what it is. I have no idea how to access it, except somehow it's in my new iPhone. Like, what is this?
That's a good question with really as broad of an answer as you want. AI is kind of that's sort of the banner. That's the marketing term for artificial intelligence. It's a branch of computer learning. So essentially, in order to create an AI that's usable, most people are familiar with either AI on their Apple phone or on Facebook or ChatGPT, which has been around for a little while now.
Yeah.
These are large language models that have been trained, basically big computers that have been trained on a lot of data, a lot of information from the internet and other sources. And essentially, the consumer level, like the ChatGPT type stuff that most of us use, it's able to process that data very quickly, and it's able to converse with you. Essentially, it has GPT in particular has a very conversational format, and that's ironically one of the dangers in my mind, at least. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So it's taking large quantities of data. It's identifying patterns, and it's being able to process at a really, really high level to give you a predictable outcome based off of your query. So you can teach it. Essentially, it learns by telling it, well, this is not accurate, this is accurate. I have a friend that worked for NVIDIA for about 20 years, and 10 or 15 years ago, he was telling me we played volleyball together, and afterwards he was saying, well, today was a big day. Our AI was able to identify a cat, which seems insignificant for us, but that was a banner day, because it not only did it said this is a cat, but everything else in this image was not a cat, and it was trained off of millions and millions and millions of images. So the guys at Stanford had the math with the algorithms. We finally had enough data from the internet to start training these, and then NVIDIA gave us some computing power to kind of put it all together. That's why we've seen such a big explosive presence of AI over the last few years.
It seems pretty clear that AI is one of those technologies. Now it's surpassed the novelty thing, and it's becoming more baked into what life is going to be like. And to your point a minute ago, I mean, how do you access it? Well, there's a jillion ways to access AI, and more, Michael, to the point you made on our last Logos episode, it's becoming a part of the features even of, Bible softwares, things like that. But I think the lines are going to be blurred a little bit more as we go forward about where AI begins and ends. Do you agree?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Jason said a little bit.
Please.
We need to understand, too, that AI has been around for a long time. This isn't new. Generative AI is relatively recent, but even going back to spell checking, that's a form of AI. It noted what you typed and said you didn't type that right. Now, it's expanded exponentially since then, but AI in itself is really not the new technology. It's this generative AI where it can look at a body of photos, as Jason was talking about, and identify things in the photos. It can write sentences for you. You can give it a prompt or a query, and it can generate content. Is where the real explosion has come, and now we're just finding it everywhere.
And so that's what this generative means, right? Is that you're saying it's sort of creating content. I mean, it's doing that based on some kind of model somewhere, some data that it's drawing from. I heard Chad Landman and I were having lunch the other day, and Chad said it's kind of like Super Google. And I was like, okay, I could see that. Yeah. Dale, what do you want to add to this so far?
Well, I think it's a playground.
Okay.
It seems to give me being everything. And I was moving along fine with Chat GPT, and then I heard about Perplexity, and I started using Perplexity, and then it seems every week a new one comes out that's supposed to be better than the last one. In just the last few weeks, OpenAI, and then DeepSeek, and then Grok last week, or Grok, I don't know how you pronounce it, Grok.
Okay, you're just speaking nonsense now.
Yeah, but every single week it seems like there's a new one. This is going to be better than the previous one.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow. All right. So this is a lot. So all those things you just mentioned, Perplexity and Grok and ChatGPT, I don't know why. ChatGPT is like the one, right? It's sort of the main one that everybody seems to know about. I don't know if that, whatever that means. But all of these are ways that we can actually go. We're going to AI and we're saying, hey, do this for me. But to the point a minute ago, when I type in the Photos app of my phone, hey, show me pictures of my dog. And Jason, to the point you made about the NVIDIA guy 15 years ago or so, I mean, my phone knows what a dog is, or, it can identify what a cat is. And all of that has some sort of artificial intelligence that it's drawing from in order to make that even a thing.
Right. All of your facial recognition software, things like that. And that's where a lot of people get really concerned about on the international level of China. I heard someone in the industry once say that they're not too concerned about the threat of China because there's more data in English than there is in Mandarin. And so just the data set is going to be larger. But where I think China definitely has an edge on us, and not to go like political with it necessarily, but they're very advanced in their facial recognition because the state uses it everywhere. And so we think of ourselves living in sort of a time period where we're always being under surveillance. Well, certain countries have been doing that for a long time. And so the more images they have, the more it can be trained. So there's a sense in which we're all a part of this group project without really signing up for it or knowing that we signed up for it. So the things we post online, even the things that we search, to Michael's point, your technology has been learning you from the moment you started using it, right? Predictive text was a step in that direction. Your algorithms that chart how long you look at images, how you interact with them, engage with them, that creates your feed. All of that stuff has AI tendencies to it, if not overt AI technology. So that he's exactly right. It's been around for a very long time in various forms or fashions.
On a small scale, I can go on my iPhone and I can say, this person's name is blank. And heretofore, it will show me pictures of that person identified by name. And what's crazy is, like, with my kids on my phone knows my kid's face from birth until now over a span of like 8 years.
Well, the same way that pardon me, didn't mean to interrupt, but the same way you would teach your child, this is grandpa, this is grandma, over and over again, showing pictures, even if they're not there, you're also training the model there to identify accurately and correctly. I had Google popped up with 4 or 5 suggestions the other day, and it was my kids when they were babies versus now they're 6 and 8, 10 years old. It's pretty impressive what it can do, and can be very, very useful. But everything in the tech world has an equal and opposite use and reaction, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a good
point. Michael, may I add that its integration into almost every app out there is just becoming huge. MailChimp got something about a week ago where there's going to MailChimp, and then yesterday I used a thing called my email service is simply called Superhuman. I use it. I got a long video yesterday from the owner of Superhuman talk about how they're going to be using it. Bloomerang, almost every program out there now is beginning to integrate it into what it does. Facebook, obviously, Meta.
So we're going to get into this. I think we're probably all for an agreement. We haven't shared a script. We just have a list of questions. That's pretty much all we have, everyone. So anyway, this is going to be a fun conversation. But I think we're in agreement that AI, like all of technology, is morally neutral, and it all depends on how you use it. There are dangers that we need to think about, especially as it relates. I mean, I was thinking about, youth ministers need to be on top of things. Elders probably need to be on top of things relative to the way that all this is working. This definitely is changing the game in a lot of areas. There are ethical concerns that we're going to need to address. At the same time, I mean, for efficiency and things like that, whether you're talking about sorting your email or whatever, I mean, there's a ton of opportunities that are here. So we're going to get into all of this. How have you, just broad brush now, on a high level so far, have you seen, and if so, how have you seen AI impacting the church so far? I mean, I feel like this is pretty new still, because in the public forum, I feel like now when we say AI, even older members know that's a thing. I hear people talking about the AI, but like, are you seeing impacts of this down into the church life, and negative or positive? I mean, what do we think so far? Let's go in reverse order. Dale, we'll start with you this time.
Thank you. I thought both the best and the worst.
Okay.
I'm seeing it in the worst. I heard one guy recently that wrote his whole sermon using AI and just put it out there. And then the best, it makes everything I do, if I think clear enough to run it through AI, sharper, more creative in organizing and communicating more effectively and writing more clear. And I'm seeing it begin to be used more and more by churches to do their processes.
Mm-hmm. By the way, before we started the show, I asked ChatGPT to produce a sermon outline on the ethics of using AI to produce sermons. And it's got a pretty nice outline in there. I recognize the irony. But also, P.S., notice the fine print here. By messaging ChatGPT, you agree to our terms. And we assume you've read our privacy policy. So don't share anything that's sensitive. So, I mean, kind of to the point maybe about what we're talking about here. Michael, you're still going in the same order because you're in the middle. But how do you feel about
story
the
of my
impacts?
life, Robert?
Yeah.
Story of my life. I'm still not seeing a ton of it. Although with what I do, training young preachers, I see a lot more of them leveraging some of these tools. Sometimes in good ways, sometimes in not so good ways.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a new enough technology that I don't think it's impacting the church yet as a whole. But as Dale mentioned, I mean, there are some who are generating sermons with it. I see it used. What I'm hearing is it's being used more for ideation than anything else. And from that standpoint, I think that can be a good use of the tool. You're struggling with coming up with a series of topics for something, or a title for a sermon, or a title for a Bible class, and you're just stumped with maybe a creative way to do that. AI can generate, a number of those kinds of ideas and feed your brainstorming. And from that standpoint, I think it has a lot of positive attributes. I think the biggest thing that I'm still hearing, and I'm surprised, but I'm going to put it out there, Skynet has not been launched. I really am serious. I talked to a lot of folks, maybe that grew up through those 80s, 70s time period, who believe that the robots are going to destroy mankind because they've seen too many sci-fi movies. I don't believe that's the case. Artificial intelligence is not intelligent. It looks smart, but it's very algorithmic. It's very pattern recognition oriented. It's not thinking on its own. Now, it does a great job of making us think that it's thinking, but it's not thinking. And it's not going to come up, at least not at this point, with its own ideas of how to conquer the world. So, in the church, though, I think it's still new enough that I think there's still a lot of, I don't know that we should mess with it at all. It's evil. And others that say we should be doing everything with it. And, I think we've got to navigate. I think over the next year and a half, we're going to see more of an explosion.
And in the meantime, our youth groups are already very far down the road with ChatGPT. We're trying to figure out if this is having any impact on the church, and our youth groups are like, okay, everybody at school uses this. So we got to figure this out quick. Jason, what do you want to add here?
So I just returned from doing, like I said, a couple workshops in South Alabama. One of those was at a Christian school there, and had two different sessions. One session was with senior high, and the other was with middle schoolers. And it was interesting to hear their thoughts on AI. We did a whole class on it, and the high schoolers, exclusively their comments were, it helps me do my homework / do all my work. It's the easy way out. It's a way to cheat. And then they got real shy because they forgot the teachers were in the room. But the middle schoolers were interesting because they associated, when I asked, well, what is AI? Almost every comment was related to robots. They felt like it was, robot oriented. And then there was one kid that said, and China. So that told me that
And China.
Their thought is, almost Rosie the robot Jetson level. And they're kind of mimicking what their parents say about it. I think largely we fear the things that we don't know and understand. Mm-hmm. And when people who create something still don't fully understand how it works and why it works the way it does, that brings more fear. So I think generally in the church, in my lifetime, I think the first reaction to newness and change, especially technology, is resistance. Mm-hmm. And we'd just rather kind of let it pass us by. I think there's less of that now maybe than there used to be 20, 30 years ago. But there's also technology, it scales everything up, right? It amplifies. So the internet didn't change humanity. It let everyone in humanity have a microphone. And so it amplified, like the things that are there, we have greater access to some things that are already there. Now they're definitely, it did change some things, I guess, about it. So maybe that's not a complete statement, but getting to my point, I think there's some great uses. Last year, we were going to do a sermon series here at Madison on the Kings and Judges, and we're trying to figure out how can we communicate this a little bit better to our children. And so we used AI. I don't know if you can see it. If I can get the block here. We created, this artwork is all AI generated. I put our church logo in there, put it in Photoshop, and created a frame. And so for every week, we had a new sermon. We used AI artwork. I started with a friend of mine who's a great artist, very, very good artist. And we started figuring out how could we create a card for each king and judge. And after a week or two, he's like, man, I don't think I can do the volume of this and to the level that we want it to really look. So I kind of passively, just jokingly said, well, maybe we should use AI. And this is before it was a big deal. And so he started playing around with Midjourney. And he said, I think there may be something here. So every week we were working our prompts and got it put together. And these cost us about $35 to print 500 of them a week, and at our local print shop, because they're a little bit bigger than a business card. Yeah. So it was pennies as far as the value goes. But what we did, in order for anyone to get a card each week after the sermon, they had to find one of our elders, and they had to share with them what we talked about in that lesson. And so what the best part of this was it was a great use of emerging technology, but we used the technology, instead of creating a generation gap, we used it to create an intergenerational interaction that might not have happened otherwise. And my father-in-law is an elder here, and he said one of his favorite parts of that was not just the interaction with the kids, but their parents as well. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really cool way, I think, to use AI to bring different ages together, as opposed to allow Satan to divide us. I think he's been really crafty in creating more of a perceived age gap than really exists. Scripture talks about how the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Well, one generation can't say to the other, I have no need of you. We're all a part of the body. And so figuring out ways to creatively leverage technology is our job, just as it's the job of the church in every age. These are the tools of our age, and we have to figure out how to steward them wisely.
That's probably where we need to focus here as ministers, people who are trying to help out ministers. I mean, we're focused on how we can use these tools in ways that can accomplish more good to the glory of God. How exactly this is all going to impact everybody on an individual level remains to be seen. And, so many of us have enjoyed embracing new technologies, and we're trying to use those in good, positive ways. At the same time, this year it suddenly struck me, my phone is really annoying me, and I feel like it distracts me all the time. And then I picked up this scary book called The Anxious Generation, and I realized, what is this thing doing to me? And this isn't just about the young people of the day. I read this and I was like, well, I kind of relate to some of this stuff too. And I'm not a Gen Z, so I don't, so anyway, all that to say, it remains to be seen some of the individual impacts on how some of these things are going to do. I think some of us are already seeing some negative handwriting on the wall. At the same time, the opportunities are almost unparalleled at the exact same time. I mean, who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought even 5 years ago that I could type a prompt into a thing and it would spit out a video or an image that was actually worth something. But at the same time, I saw a video that was being shared around Facebook the other day, and it was innocent, I guess. It was supposed to be like Teddy Roosevelt. It's the unseen video of Teddy Roosevelt. But as I looked closely, I realized that every time he walked, his back right foot disappeared. And I'm like, that's an AI-generated video.
That's how Teddy was. Most people don't know about Teddy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Everybody knows his back foot used to disappear like that when he took steps. But so I do want to add, be on guard. Yeah.
I do want to add, the image generation stuff is astonishing to me, more so even than the text generation stuff. I'm an artist. I'm a photographer. The ability to create images that are Bible based and can visualize. I have a whole folder full of images. The pillar of fire with the nation of Israel following it in the desert, and the pillar of smoke. Those kinds of things, Solomon in all of his glory. You could never shoot a photo of that. You don't have the costumes or the sets. And yet you can create a picture of Jesus walking on water that's just astonishingly realistic looking. And it takes 2 seconds, a little more than that, but not much. And I think that use for the church, especially to visualize biblical things, is a powerful use.
What kind
it's
of
the flannel graph?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
It is.
I was going to say, this is the flannel graph of the 21st century, right? It's the same way, visual teaching.
Yeah.
The ability to do so much graphically. I'm with Michael on that, and Jason. It blows my mind. I just am amazed how quickly I can put out really quality images that are specified exactly what I want. That for years I had trouble finding it. Am I stealing it? Am I borrowing it? Am I buying it?
Right.
And now I can just do it immediately. I can draw. See, I can draw. Most people know I'm a good drawer. There's my picture of a child in a tree right there, swinging. Or I could just real quickly go into Grok. I did this with Grok yesterday.
Whoa. Something weird just happened. I have no idea what it is, but you sound like a robot to me now.
You said the wrong word. AI.
He said Grok, and AI was like, meow, 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 meow.
Yeah.
That was strange.
Yeah.
He's still doing it. I don't know what's happening here.
The editors, the overseers heard you and are editing your...
I don't
in
know
real
what's
time.
happening here.
Is it still doing that? Is it still doing it?
You're good now. Yeah, it's back.
Am I better now? Okay, so real quickly on that, Michael and Jason both mentioned it, these people that are fearmongers. The Lord has already told us how this is all going to end.
Okay.
I don't care what anybody comes along, the people who are afraid we're going to have the environmental crisis and that's going to end the world, and now it's this AI is going to end the world. It's not going to end that way. The Lord's already told us how it's going to end. When he decides it's going to end, he's already set that day, and nothing we do or say is going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to get theological there, but that was
good. That was good. And Dale's drawing broke the internet. We just all heard it here live, right here on the podcast. So that's all I'm saying. Let's talk about how AI shapes biblical research, study tools, even using AI-generated content or going to like ChatGPT or something relative to sermon or Bible class prep. Thoughts there? Michael, shall we start with you so you're not monkey in the middle this time? We got into this a little bit on the Logos episode recently.
Yeah, I think we did. I really do, and I don't work for Logos. I always feel like I need to say that.
Yeah.
I do think Logos is approaching this well, as far as being able to summarize articles and research for you so that you can kind of navigate your way through hundreds of search results. How do you narrow that down to the ones that really are valuable to you? And using AI to summarize those findings can really be powerful and help.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, there are times where just typing into Chat GPT can give you some good information. One of the things we haven't mentioned yet and need to is the hallucinations that happen with AI, and that's just a term that describes that AI is not always correct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it's right, sometimes it's astonishingly correct. But when it's wrong, it's epically wrong. Um, examples are putting George Washington in the wrong time frame, or things like that. But typing in how does Paul use the term flesh in the book of Romans gives you some interesting ideas to help jumpstart your study. Now, I wouldn't copy and paste that into sermons or into research, but it can get a study started and points you into some good direction sometimes.
That's a good point. And what's amazing for stuff like that, and I think you used the term on that episode, season 21, episode 1 of Preachers in Training, but you called it like a research assistant, and I love that. And then you start talking about, and this is kind of next level stuff, but if you go to like Google's Notebook LM and or create your own GPT where you can upload your own sources or whatever you want, and now it's drawing from that information. And so, okay, based on these tools, and that's essentially what Logos is doing, right? I've got these tools available to me. Based on this, tell me how Paul uses this term throughout. Again, I mean, you still want to fact check it, but still,
Absolutely.
I mean, the possibilities there are crazy.
Yeah. Well,
Robert, just a little inside thing here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I would say real quickly, just a little inside thing would be always ask it. Are you sure? I found that simple question. You can say, are you sure? And it'll say, oh, I was wrong about that. It's amazing how it realizes it was incorrect.
Really? Okay.
It's an ongoing learning process, right? So I know there's a school in Georgia that is training their curriculum, basically. So they're feeding it commentaries and the sources that they want to use, and allowing it to then spit out at a high efficiency rating curriculum. And so if you're putting together a VBS, you can give it your ideas, you can give it even the sources you want to pull from. And it's a really good job, as Michael has said, especially of sorting through as a research assistant would. It can definitely help you be more efficient in your workflow. I think maybe the Reagan philosophy may be appropriate, trust but verify. Okay, more and more GPTs are also tagging an original source. So to Dale's point, if it gives you something, you can ask, well, where did you find that? What's your original source? And it'll tell you if it doesn't have one. But if it does, then you can go and you can read for yourself. So I feel like it's if Dewey were here with a Dewey Decimal, he would be a fan of it, of saying, hey, this can help point you in the right direction, but you're the one that has to do all the digging. And anytime you can get a Dewey Decimal reference, I feel like it's a good podcast episode. Right. So yes, that one's free there.
I was just thinking, you may be the first in 21 seasons to ever say if Dewey were here. So this is
there
great.
We go.
I like this.
I'm going to give myself a card catalog.
That's right.
Isn't he one of Donald Duck's nephews, Dewey?
Huey,
that's right.
Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Yeah,
that's right.
To your point, Jason, Perplexity really is excellent at giving you sources. That's what I like most about it. It always gives you sources.
Yeah.
Hey, I meant to ask you guys, because some people are going to be saying, yeah, but where do I go to make the custom images and stuff like that? Somebody mentioned one earlier, what Midjourney or something? Yeah.
Midjourney.
Midjourney's been around probably as long as any of them. It's good. I've started transitioning to ChatGPT just because it was about $15 a month cheaper, and it was all you get access to GPT 4.0 and all that good stuff. So they're really now. I mean, they're almost a dime a dozen. There are a ton of options. You can even use Meta AI to create images as well. So
Midjourney looks like I'm about to have a blue screen of death or something going on here. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, that's kind of that's the main site there, but it actually works in conjunction with some other things for you to submit your prompts and everything. But again, it's been around for a long time, and I assume they'll have to change their pricing structure at some point, simply because there are so many other opportunities and so many other platforms now. Like any new technology, there's the boom, it's the gold rush, and then there's some leveling out. And that's when you start to see the real players kind of separate. NVIDIA is experiencing that. I mean, their stock dropped drastically last week because of DeepSeek and all that good stuff. So all the different new emerging technologies, the difference I think now and 20 years ago is the volume. It's just scaling up. We've moved from an incremental increase to a exponential increase. And so when you have the technology you're creating that's now creating the technology, obviously it's going to scale up at a higher scale than it has in the past. So that's part of, I think, the hysteria and the cautiousness, which I think the caution is good. I think we should be optimistically cautious as we move forward. We don't need to adopt every technology blindly. In fact, Sam Altman was testifying at a congressional hearing in 23, and that was the conversation. Senator Richard Blumenthal, I think he's in Connecticut, but he basically said we missed the boat as far as Congress goes of legislating healthy guardrails for social media. Kind of referred to it as our first pass at AI, and so we can't make the same mistake the second go around. But Sam Altman was like, yeah, we probably do need regulation, but we don't really know where to regulate. In our country, regulation's a little bit of a bad word at times, when it comes to a free market economy and those kinds of things. So there's a balance there of figuring out how do we restrict the negative consequences while leveraging the positive. In the medical community, AI is wonderful. I mean, we're going to diagnose cancers already diagnosing cancers at an earlier rate than it's ever been done before. So it's a net good for society. But then when you talk about the deep fakes and the way it can be used for malicious intent, then that scales up equally. So it is a bit of a nuanced technology, I think.
How do you think we can warn? I was thinking the other day, if as Christians we want to be people of credibility, of integrity. Of course, as preachers, we ought to model that. And there are maybe some dangers there with AI where we could fall into some less than ethical decisions that we might make. In addition to that, though, I mean, it's kind of like if you're going around always sharing conspiracy theories and things like that. I mean, what impact could that have on your influence? And if you're the, so to speak, the boy who cried wolf all the time, then are people really going to listen to you when you have something that is substantive to say? Like, for example, sharing the gospel with those people. How do we warn the church or minister to the church relative to a world that's filled with deep fakes and misinformation? And how do we guard against Paul talks about we shouldn't be children tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. And I'm like, well, now you got AI in addition to all that. It's like, can John, we help or something there? Michael, you were saying?
John 17:17, okay. Right? Your word is truth. And we have to ensure that the church understands that there's one source of truth, and that's Scripture. AI is maybe more informed than one of your friends, but it's no more correct theologically than somebody that that you want to ask a question of. The true answer is in the pages of Scripture and revealed from the mind of God. And I agree that we can't be Chicken Little. The sky's not falling here. But we've had the same answer throughout man's history. God's revealed word is what we need to depend on, and we're looking for shortcuts. And that, I think that's the problem, is our lives are so busy. We don't have time to study the Scripture. Let me just type into Chat GPT and it'll tell me what the Bible says. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. We should be like the Bereans and always check. If they were going to check the inspired Apostle Paul and verify what he said against Scripture, we should check everything we hear, whether it's from Chat GPT or from Dale Jenkins, right?
So are you giving a spectrum, or what are we doing? Okay, all right.
I would suggest
from any
Michael,
preacher, right?
Right.
I was just teasing.
First of all, I would suggest first of all that leaders lead. Leaders lead. We've got to have leaders that step up there. And then you ask how to handle this with the church. Yeah. I think one of the real things is we got to bring darkness into light. That's our mission a lot of times. There are deep fakes out there. Well, if we just kind of hide out and pretend this doesn't exist, we're wasting our time, and our teenagers will call us out on it. Our adults will see it as well, but teenagers will call us out on it. We've got to bring darkness into light and be a leader and say, all right, here's what's going on. Here's how to use this, and do our best to do that. One other quick thing, you ask about finding images. I use probably about 8 different AIs right now to create images. I use them for different purposes. I learned yesterday that PowerPoint is integrated. Copilot, which is a Microsoft program, is integrated with PowerPoint now. And so when you put a words on your PowerPoint slide, you can put the words on there and ask it to draw that slide. Kind of neat.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Boy, it just keeps getting easier and easier. Jason, what do you want to add to this?
Yeah. I think the 2 greatest challenges for emerging generations are rightly identifying relationships worth investing in. I think there's a danger that too many of our, not just emerging generations, but too many people developed a relationship with technology. When I was a kid, we had those little Tamagotchi digipets, and you would have to feed it. You have to, make sure it got sleep and all, and you cultivated a relationship. And if at the lunch table somebody killed your digipet, it destroyed you, right? There was an emotional attachment. For many of us, our emotional attachment to freedom was tied to our car. So when our parents took our keys away, they took away our freedom, our conduit to relationship and community outside our home. Well, today, students don't care about getting the driver's license because their symbol of freedom is their phone, in the same way that previous generations, it was their car. So that's a way to kind of calibrate the language. I think every generation, particularly in adolescence, I think Fuller Youth Institute put out a book that highlighted this. They're trying to answer 3 questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? And what is my purpose? So community, identity, and purpose. And what's changed significantly over the last 50 to 100 years is that instead of, especially in an agrarian society, when most of us grew up on a family farm, we had parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, neighbors that we knew because when their cows got out, we helped them and ours got out, vice versa. A closer proximity community helped define and help answer those questions. But now you've got a 8 or a 10-year-old staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning asking ChatGPT, who am I? What's my purpose? Yeah. Just a few months ago, a headline was a young man that had cultivated a relationship with the chatbot, and the chatbot eventually said, come join me on the other side. And so the young man took his own life simply because what we as adults know as a chatbot, he saw as a relationship. And that's why I mentioned earlier, the conversational nature of ChatGPT is concerning for me. The fact that we can put funny pictures of ourselves out there is very entertaining. And as Dale said, it's like a toy store in some ways, right? But I think my concern for that as well is the equal and opposite side of it is for an emerging generation that doesn't have the prefrontal cortex development yet to identify right from wrong, also healthy and unhealthy, when they have this unlimited ability to doctor photos of themselves, then seeing that repeated behavior in the other people in their lives, like that's already led to stuff that some of that research in Jonathan Haidt's book of the filters from Snapchat and from some of those other app, TikTok and all, where you can change how you look. And for many of us, it's funny. I've done that with my kids. You do the funny ones when you got cat whiskers, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. But when you start to change your actual photos and even sometimes when we mean it to be well-meaning or even creating a creative project, my concern is for younger generations, it hits them differently. They don't have the same toolbox that the rest of us do. And that's part of this generational challenge is that at the core, I think we've all agreed with this, that the spiritual challenges here are the same. There's nothing new under the sun. I agree with Solomon there. But I think the way they're packaged and the access to those things has changed drastically over the last 20, 25 years. And I think Haidt's research in particular, among others, it really shows that we weren't aware of that. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. Usually it's an incremental. It's like being at the beach and you look up and you're 400 yards away from where you entered the water and all you've been doing is playing, right? That's how Satan is very clever. That's how he does this. And I think he allows the technology conversation, if we let him, to become a polarizing thing where older generation, I don't have any need for that. Well, yeah, you do, because you also live in the digital age. And you don't just need the younger generation to change your phone out of Portuguese back to English, when you accidentally change it. You also need them they need to hear your life experience, and you need to hear what
Yeah.
they're thinking as well. So I think it's technology actually is an opportunity to unite us, but too often Satan divides us, and then these negatives we've been talking about, they again they amplify, they scale up pretty quickly, and it gets out of our control at that point.
So it seems like equipping current and future generations with what is truth, why we really need truth, not just fact checking, but how to decipher, what is true from what isn't, and basically, instilling and ingraining within us over and over, as we have been for generations now, that God's word is truth, to the point of John 17:17. But also from that truth comes this truth that we need authentic, real relationships. And we need to be modeling that as best we can, especially within the church and within the home. And we don't just need to assume, well, younger generations are blank or older generations are blank. Younger generations only like to look down at their phones all the time, so I'm not even going to try and mix in with them. Or all old people want to do is get together and rag on the younger generations. So we need to find ways that we can model that. That's not going to make ChatGPT or AI in general go away. It's just going to help us better utilize those tools in ways that are actually good rather than ways that are bad. It strikes me, living in a college town and interacting with college students quite often, that stranger danger isn't a thing in their vocabulary anymore. And now, in addition to that, it's like we have this meta stranger that we kind of need to be watching out for in the form of chatbots. And by the way, there was a thing going around Facebook not that long ago, some preacher saying, well, don't you see, if you go to ChatGPT and you ask, what's the plan of salvation, it tells you that baptism is necessary for the forgiveness of sins. And I want to be like, you understand that it's learned that from you. It knows your theological bent, and the algorithm is playing into you. That ChatGPT is not objectively true. So anyway, I just think maybe there are some fundamental misunderstandings that maybe all of us have. We're trying to come to this, and it'll begin by just continuing to push these principles that we've held dear for so very long about what is truth. How do you find it? And maybe that's a question that we've taken for granted over the years, that we could use to double down on, not just with our youth group, but with everybody in our congregation. How do I find truth, and how do I know truth when I've found it? And I think that could help in a lot of ways, not just in identifying truth from error biblically, but also in helping us to see everything through a biblical lens or a biblical worldview. Michael?
Robert,
Yes, sir.
in addition to that, it saddens me that people can find sometimes more empathy and understanding and feedback from an algorithm than they can from other human beings.
Wow.
It's not just about truth, although that's obviously for the church, that's a critical one. But are we open to the relationships that we should be having? Can we converse and really get into each other's lives to the point where we are able to empathize with one another, and we're able to understand and counsel and guide? The technology is isolating us into these digital environments, if you will, and we feel comfortable there because we're not going to be judged, we're not going to be accused, and so on. And it's a sad commentary on our culture, but I think the church should be a mechanism to break out of that and say, here is where you can be honest with us. Here's where we want to get to know you, and we want to understand you, and we want to listen to what your problems are, and we have answers because God provides answers.
Absolutely.
You don't need a chatbot to get those answers, but when they feel more empathized with and understood from an algorithm, that's going to be a hard one to change unless we start really getting into each other's lives and really listening to one another and sharing with one another and creating safe spaces for people to share their struggles.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important point. One of the things that I get asked often, partly because of my title, is, well, how good do we have to make our live stream? Because we really don't want people to just be content staying at home. And to me, those are very different conversations. If someone chooses to stay home and observe a live stream for worship, and they feel like that is as fulfilling as being with God's people, then there's one of two things. You either have a church culture issue in your congregation, or they have a heart issue. And that has nothing to do, I think, with the quality of your live stream. We get a lot of random people that stumble upon us through our live stream that we would not otherwise. So I think that's a separate entity. I go back to those three things: community, identity, and purpose. When people find those three things outside the church more easily, particularly in the virtual space, in the digital space, then that's an internal problem for us in our congregations and in our homes. Because just as Michael said, I think in the digital age, the things that the church is founded upon of connection to God and to each other, those things shine even brighter in an age where especially emerging generations are more connected online than they are offline. Hite in his book talked about how somewhere in the mid-90s, we decided that it was too dangerous to be outside, so we brought everybody inside, and then they got online. I have a neighbor that lives near me that works for the Secret Service, and it's a secret, so don't tell anybody. But part of his role is to do online trafficking. And so he says that not too long ago, they rescued a young teenage boy who was groomed online, not the creepy van driving through, not the ice cream van or any of that, like that kind of thing. And it's the online folks that we just threw a whole generation online. They didn't know any better, but now we do. And so there's definitely, oftentimes you put up a guardrail after you've had a few cars go off the side, right? You put up a traffic light after you've had some traffic incidents at the intersection. Yeah. So we're about 30 years into this, and we've had some really unhealthy habits that have formed. In the same sense, big tobacco, the first Surgeon General's report for tobacco and nicotine products came out in 1964. That blew my mind, because it wasn't until probably the mid-90s that we started having public opinion change about those things. Well, we're closing in on 30 years of this social media experiment as well. And a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and apparently a really good lawyer, he's at the forefront, lead counsel with some of these lawsuits against Meta, TikTok, and other platforms, because they had this research that they knew how addictive their product was, and they still marketed to adolescents, which is textbook big tobacco approach. You hook them early, you hook them forever. And so that's the sinister side of it. There's not an algorithm. I know we said technology is neutral. There's not a neutral algorithm out there, because the moment it gets implemented, it's going in a direction. And it has a tendency to create these echo chambers that are also unhealthy. But again, that goes back to what Michael said, that connection. When you have wise counsel in your life, people that are older than you, they're not always going to agree with you. And that disagreement is a good thing, because that's iron sharpens iron. That is, strands of a cord tighter together. The technology that we use has to help us. When I moved into this role, I had an elder make a pretty profound statement to me. He said, "Jason, we want you to help us to be high tech, but the only reason we want to be high tech is to be high touch." When technology, when it pulls us apart, when it allows us to be content without having proximity, we're in the wrong direction. But we want to be high touch. We want to be in each other's lives. We have to be, because that is the church. You can't separate those things.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I want to mention, though, that all this is true, but in the right hands, this can be a good thing. And let's be the right hands. Let's make sure we see the good in it and figure out the good in it to use it for good. Just like social media or anything else, as you said earlier, it's neuter. It's neither good nor bad. It depends on how it's used. Well, let's make a difference and use it well and use it wisely for the good of the kingdom of God. And we can be a part of that. And what a great, exciting time from that standpoint to be alive right now, to have the opportunity to use this tool that the Lord has put in our hands to use for good. Let's figure out how to use it for good and use it that way.
I love the leadership behind, Jason, the thought that you just mentioned, high tech to be high touch, because that shows us that your leaders there are leading, and they're keeping the main things. And sometimes we think technology might give us a Pentecost moment where we can be 1 to 3,000. Maybe we can get so many people to come to Jesus because we're utilizing mass media. There has to come some point where, if we're engaging people for the gospel, there's a one-on-one. That's got to happen at some point. And in as much as we can utilize technology, and frankly, AI can be great for this, even automation to some degree, maybe even coupled with AI, can be great to connect interested individuals, seekers, with those who can help to provide the truth for those kinds of folks. And so we can't let the novelty of this, or even, this is what I'm finding, I think about, whoa, look at what all this could do. And I get so overwhelmed by the possibilities that I never really execute it down to like what I actually can use it to do. And we just got to make sure that we're keeping all the main things, I think, as we sort of think about this. Yeah. Boy, there's a lot more that could be said. I'm looking at the time, and I know we've got some hard out times we've got to think about. Last words, I guess, as we go around the horn. You can find Dale Jenkins at thejenkinsinstitute.com, the great work that he and his brother Jeff are doing. We appreciate you so much and all that you do. Final thoughts as we wrap up our conversation today?
Well, I would say don't fear it. God created creativity. AI is a part of that.
Yeah.
Instead of learning from it, let's learn to use it for good in our churches. Let's dive in, experiment with the good in it, and use wisdom and integrity. Keep that at the center of what we're doing, and try to, as we deal with our young people and our older people, help them be warned of the dangers of it. But in the meantime, let's embrace what's good in it.
I love it. Michael Hite is with the Bear Valley Bible Institute in Denver. WeTrainPreachers.com. He's our resident Logos expert as well here on Preachers in Training. We appreciate that. Final word. Thank you for being here today. Final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's an important conversation, and it's one that will change by next month and 6 months from now. And, the church has always been perceived as 20 years behind. I think we're learning to get out in front of some of these things, and I would encourage us to look at the possibilities of how we can use these technologies to advance the gospel and to communicate more effectively. There are opportunities to do that, and that's the mission we've been given. Let's not shun a possible megaphone because we're afraid that somebody might shout something bad through it. Let us use it to send the message of Christ and reach out to a lost and dying world, and try to do that more effectively. And I think if we keep our mission in mind, I love what Jason said, high tech for high touch is really what we need to be focused on.
Yes. Yeah. I like that megaphone analogy. That's a good one. That's good. Jason Helton is with the Madison, Alabama Church of Christ and his great seminars, Analog Faith in Digital Babylon. Boy, really good, very well researched. Appreciate your time today, sir. Final thoughts as we wrap up here?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Honored to be with you guys and be a part of this conversation. I agree with everything that was just said. I think Romans 12:2 tells us to transform, to not be conformed to this world, be transformed in the renewal of our minds, so that we can discern the will of God. And I think in the digital age, we are called, like the church in every age, to leverage the tools of our time to effectively amplify the gospel, grow the kingdom, while at the same time being wise and discerning to make sure we put in the right guardrails to protect us spiritually as well. That's our call, that's our charge, and that's really exciting because we get to be very creative and use some really powerful tools while at the same time being wise and practicing discernment there.
Yeah, really good. Thank you all, and we want to thank you for being a part of this episode of Preachers in Training. Reminder that brand new episodes release on Thursdays from thelightnetwork.tv and our podcast partners. I think we got to continue the conversation on AI eventually, and we'll continue to do that. Until then, let's use it for God's glory and preach the word.